And they haven't turned us into a nation of zombies for nothing. They have plans for our country. Some background information. The second bank of the United States, our second central bank, got a 20-year charter in 1816. But in 1828 it had a little problem. The problem was that Andrew Jackson became president. He was no friend of the bankers or paper money. The charter was going to run out at the end of Jackson's second term, and there was no chance of it being extended. So the bankers went down swinging. They tried to pass an early extension in 1832 during Jackson's re-election campaign. It passed the Senate and the House and landed on Jackson's desk. They were daring him to veto it because it could cost him the election. I'm going to read an excerpt from his veto message to the Senate. Deeply impressed with the belief that some of the powers and privileges possessed by the existing bank are unauthorized by the Constitution, subversive of the rights of the states, and dangerous to the liberties of the people, I felt it my duty at an early period of my administration to call the attention of Congress to the practicability of organizing an institution combining all of its advantages and obviating these objections. I sincerely regret that in the act before me I can perceive none of those modifications of the bank charter which are necessary, in my opinion, to make it compatible with justice, with sound policy, or with the Constitution of our country. Old Hickory removed the bank's federal deposits and he killed it. But we soon forgot this chapter in our history, and 77 years later, in 1913, right before Christmas, they passed the Federal Reserve Act, which gave birth to our current central bank, the Federal Reserve. Its birth was suspicious, to say the least. They gave us the income tax earlier that year, and international banking cartels owned our government ever since. It's not hard to see that our banking system is a scam. The Federal Reserve essentially prints money out of thin air. It's not backed up by anything of real value like gold and silver. What gives it value is your belief in the fact that you can trade Federal Reserve notes for goods and services. And since they're a private bank, and the banks charge interest on the money they loan out, all the money that leaves the Federal Reserve has debt attached to it. So if we as Americans gathered all of our money together to pay off all the debt we owed, we couldn't do it because there isn't enough money to do so. Our money is debt. And since Congress gave its power to print money over to the Federal Reserve in 1913, the dollar has lost 97% of its purchasing power. $100 in 1913 is the equivalent of about $2,200 today. That's over a 2,000% rate of inflation. Things don't cost more every year. Your dollars are just losing value. Putting it bluntly, you're being robbed. October 29, 1929, the stock market crashed, signaling the beginning of the Great Depression. The Federal Reserve constricted credit, the money supply dried up, and the American people were brought to their knees. Millions starved to death. Lewis Thomas McFadden, he was a Pennsylvania congressman for 20 years and president of the First National Bank in Canton, PA, and also a treasurer and president of the Pennsylvania Bankers Association. June 10, 1932, deep into the Depression, he gave a speech before the House of Representatives. I'm going to read the beginning of his speech because it's as true today as it was 77 years ago. Mr. Chairman, we have in this country one of the most corrupt institutions the world has ever known. I refer to the Federal Reserve Board and the Federal Reserve Banks. The Federal Reserve Board, a government board, has cheated the government of the United States and the people of the United States out of enough money to pay the national debt. The depredations and inequities of the Federal Reserve Board has cost this country enough money to pay the national debt several times over. This evil institution has impoverished and ruined the people of the United States, has bankrupted itself, and has practically bankrupted our government. It has done this through the defects of the law under which it operates, through the maladministration of that law by the Federal Reserve Board, and through the corrupt practices of the moneyed vultures who control it. Some people think the Federal Reserve banks are United States government institutions. They are not government institutions. They are private credit monopolies which prey upon the people of the United States for the benefit of themselves and their foreign customers. Foreign and domestic speculators and swindlers and rich and predatory moneylenders. In that dark crew of financial pirates, there are those who would cut a man's throat to get a dollar out of his pocket. There are those who send money into the states to buy votes to control our legislation. And there are those who maintain international propaganda for the purpose of deceiving us and wheedling us into the granting of new concessions which will permit them to cover up their past misdeeds and set again in motion their gigantic train of crime. These 12 private credit monopolies were deceitfully and disloyally foisted upon this country by the bankers who came here from Europe and repaid us for our hospitality by undermining our American institutions. Those bankers took money out of this country to finance Japan in a war against Russia. They created a reign of terror in Russia with our money in order to help that war along. They instigated the separate peace between Germany and Russia and thus drove a wedge between the Allies in the World War. They financed Trotsky's passage from New York to Russia so that he might assist in the destruction of the Russian Empire. They fomented and instigated the Russian Revolution, and they placed a large fund of American dollars at Trotsky's disposal in one of their branch banks in Sweden, so that through him, Russian homes may be thoroughly broken up and Russian children flung far and wide from their natural protectors. They have since begun the breaking up of American homes and the dispersal of American children. Can you believe they tried to kill this guy twice? Milton Friedman, a famous economist, recipient of the Nobel Prize in Economics, blamed the Federal Reserve for turning a recession into a catastrophe. In 2002, at a conference to honor Milton's 90th birthday, Ben Bernanke, then a Federal Reserve governor, said this: "Let me end my talk by abusing slightly my status as an official representative of the Federal Reserve. I'd like to say to Milton and Anna regarding the Great Depression, you're right, we did it. We're very sorry. But thanks to you, we won't do it again." End quote. We should have listened to McFadden, because now we're in a lot of trouble. Today the bankers and the corporations that grew up around them own the planet. They used money to conquer the world instead of armies. They went into developing nations and encouraged their governments to take out huge loans and not repay them. Then when they defaulted on the loans, they'd be forced to sell off all their infrastructure, roads, schools, power plants, and in fact they sell their country. Then the already impoverished people of that country are left holding a huge bill and no way to pay for it, because they don't own anything, not even their own governments. If a country won't accept a central bank and it won't let Western corporations hold a monopoly on its resources, whether it be oil or bananas, they send in secret intelligence, CIA, MI6, and they assassinate and start revolutions. If these tactics don't work, they send in the military. There is nowhere you can run to get away from these people. The United States is at the beginning of an engineered depression that is going to scar our country forever, if not destroy it. The public was overwhelmingly against the banker takeover bill. You probably know it as the bailout. And when it didn't pass, Congress was threatened with martial law. I quote Representative Brad Sherman. "Many of us were told in private conversations that if we voted against this bill on Monday, that the sky would fall, the market would drop 2,000 to 3,000 points the first day, another couple thousand the second day, and a few members were even told that there would be martial law in America if we voted no." End quote. The bill gave them license to start stealing money, and the money they're stealing is loans taken out on the American people's credit. You're going to have to pay back every penny with interest to the same people that stole the money. And it's impossible, because they have and currently are stealing trillions. $700 billion was a lie. And not only are they hoarding the money, they won't even tell Congress where the money is, because they own Northcom and they're ready for a hot war against the American people. When the stock market crashes, they're going to use that money to buy up whatever infrastructure they don't already own. Sound familiar? And since they're creating all this money out of thin air, the Federal Reserve note is about to experience hyperinflation. But don't worry about that, though, because the same people that did all this are going to give you a new fiat currency like the Amero, or perhaps a world currency. The North American Union. Forget arguing about whether it's going to happen, because we've been in it since March 2005. The SPP, Security and Prosperity Partnership of North America. Just like they did with the European Union, they're setting it up in secret. Why? Because this is the end of the United States we're talking about. Canada, the United States, and Mexico are being merged into a superstate. And if you think the government is criminal now, and you think we're having constitutional crisis with the central bank, income tax, free speech zone, warrantless checkpoints, the Patriot Act, and the loss of all of our other rights, just wait till the Constitution is voided and replaced with the NAU one. This is how they're setting up their world government. They're going to merge all these unions together. Everyone's going to get a national ID card. There's going to be an RFID tracking device in it so they can keep track of us slaves. And eventually all your money is going to be put on that card. Or by that time, a chip will be planted in your body. Paper money is going to be done away with, so you have zero privacy. And if you want to speak out about what they're doing, they'll just turn your chip off. Does the market beast come to anybody's mind?